The rent versus buy debate will never be settled. And that's because there are just so many different factors that come into play here. The real answer to the rent versus buy question is it just depends. What if you owned your house outright and instead you were to sell that house and rent instead? Would it be a good move financially? Of course, that does depend, but I'm going to use my real life numbers in order to help illustrate this. Hello everyone, my name is Zach and welcome to On Cash Flow, where I help you become a master of your own cash flow. Now let's get started. Okay, so here is the scenario that I'm going to be running through using my real life numbers. I'm going to assume that I'm going to sell my home. I'm going to then take that profit from selling my home, invest it in my regular investment portfolio, and I'm going to go ahead and rent a place instead. Would it be a good move financially for me in my situation where I live to sell my home that I own outright, invest the money, and rent instead? And by the way, this video was inspired by Stephen's video. Don't know how to say his last name. Why does that always seem to be the case? He made a video where he talks about why he's renting to get rich instead of buying. Stay to the end because I have a few comments on that. But let's get back to my hypothetical scenario here. So currently, according to Zillow, the Zestimate for my home is $167,400. Yes, I live in a low cost of living area. And I actually bought that house in 2020 for $110,000. So I have a good amount of equity built up in that home. If I were to sell the house, it is very expensive to sell a house, right? That's why you probably don't want to buy a house in short time frames. I can expect to pay anywhere from 5 to 7% in selling costs. I'm going to go ahead and use the higher end of the range here at 7% because as a seller, you pay the realtors and you pay some other fees as well. But I think since I'm living in a low cost of living area, the cost of the house is lower. Percentage wise, for selling it is going to be on the higher end. So I'm going to use 7%. 7% of the Zestimate price is $11,718. Therefore, if I take the Zestimate selling price and I subtract out that 7% selling costs, I should have a net profit of about $155,682. If that were the case, the amount that I actually gained versus what I bought and I sold it for, that would be completely tax-free because for federal income tax purposes, there is a exclusion that applies to your primary residence, as long as you have lived in that house for, I think, 2 years out of the previous 5 years. So that would be a really great thing, having that tax-free gain. You know what else is tax-free, by the way? Hitting the like button on this video. If you're enjoying this video so far, please make sure you like it, give it a thumbs up. It really does help me out, and I would really appreciate that. Okay, but seriously, let's get back to investing that net profit of about $155,000. So if I took that net profit and I invested it in my regular taxable brokerage account, I would probably put it to where my asset allocation would stay the same. Currently, I am 100% stocks, 80% US, and 20% international. And when I put it in there, it'll be invested about proportionally to that. With that new money invested, let's go ahead and assume that I'm going to be using the 4% safe withdrawal rate. And out of that money, I will get 4% of it, which is $6,227 per year. Divide that by 12, and we have about $519 per month. So that is how much theoretically I would take from that new amount invested. I would have an additional $519 per month to spend. What would it look like if I were to now rent an equivalent house instead in my area? Well, I can go back onto Zillow and look at how much the median price for rent is in my area. And I'm going to be looking at 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses because that is what my house is classified as. And I can see that it is $1,800 per month. That is the median price. And I'll go ahead and assume that I'll rent a house that is slightly lower than the median. Let's say 5% lower in costs, $1,710. That's how much I'm going to assume I'm going to be renting an equivalent home for. We can take that $1,710 and subtract out the extra amount of income that I'm going to be generating from investing my profit. That comes to $1,191 of difference that the rent is going to cost. Including in that additional cost are going to be many things that you would normally be paying out of pocket when you own your home. Any kind of home maintenance, home repairs, home insurance, property taxes, even opportunity cost of the money that you have sitting in your home. Do all of those add up to be more or less or equal to that extra $1,191 that it costs to rent? Without getting into the minutia and all the numbers individually, I can say that all of those things for me do not add up to that amount of money. So therefore, it costs me less to own the home currently. Of course, the hardest thing to calculate in that is the opportunity cost because you have to make some assumptions of how much you're going to be earning in ROI difference versus having it in the house, but that's a whole nother video. But this does lead me to the big question here. I want to know from you in the comments below, where you live right now, off the top of your head, what do you think is the better deal? Is the better deal to rent, or is the better deal to buy in your area? At least generally speaking. And we'll say on a 10-year time frame, at least a 10-year time frame. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. I think that currently it would technically not be a good, purely financially speaking, to sell my home and rent an equivalent home instead. And of course, I do have to say an equivalent home because it would be unfair to compare a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house to a 1-bedroom apartment. It might be cheaper to live in that 1-bedroom apartment, but it's just, apples to oranges right there. And the biggest reason why I think this is true for my situation is because I currently live in a low cost of living area. I think that the cost of living of the area of where you live is going to be the biggest financial determinant of whether renting or buying is the more financially optimal move. Keep in mind, I'm only looking at the financial part here. I'm not talking about any of the other ancillary benefits of renting versus buying. Purely financially speaking, I think that in most circumstances, if you live in a high cost of living area, it's usually going to tilt towards renting being cheaper than it is for buying. And if you live in a low cost of living area, it's generally going to be more advantageous to buy than it is to rent. And that's why when it comes to Stephen's video, he says that he is getting richer because he is renting. He is able to save more of his money by renting rather than buying a home. And I think the major determinant of why that is that he lives in a big city in Canada, a very expensive city where housing prices are very, very high. And I think the same generally holds true in many big, expensive US cities as well. It very well might be true that you will get richer by renting and investing the difference in a very expensive area versus if you are in a low cost living area, you probably are going to get richer by buying a low cost house versus renting the equivalent house. And if you're curious to see Stephen's reasoning on why he rents to get rich rather than buy, I'm going to go ahead and put his video on the screen right after I get off the screen. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Zach from OnCashFlow.com, and I hope to see you next time. And instead, you are using my real life numbers. I'm going to be looking at 3-bedroom that applies to your. What would it look like if I would? Are going to be many things that you.